Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring you curiosity because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we take a look inside the Paulucci Space Theatre and see how it continues to connect Hibbing with the cosmos. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Joining me again in this venture to the Iron Range is arts entertainment reporter Jay Gabler. Jay, welcome back.
Glad to be back from space, Wyatt.
Space, the Iron Range, same thing in this context.
Well, it was a space theater. I guess it's a theater of space rather than in space, but you can kind of imagine the latter based on its architecture.
So Jay, how'd you go about finding the story, and more specifically, how'd you end up landing on visiting this space theater? As I recall, unless I'm missing something here, it kind of came up first originally in a Northlandia team meeting where you were looking at a different potential planetarium to look at, but then we kind of shifted gears to the one we actually went to.
There are several planetariums in Minnesota, and I would love to visit all of them, including, of course, the planetarium right here at the University of Minnesota Duluth. But our colleague Terry Caddo pointed out 3 words, Jay: Paulucci Space Theatre. And I was sold. I'm like, all right, I've got to go see the Paulucci Space Theater, which I do not believe I had ever been to before. I had definitely been to Hibbing before, but I had not been to their incredible planetarium. So pleased to be able to write about it.
And I had not been either. I've been to Hibbing several times for stories and work. I've even been to the college there for various news stories I've done over the years, but I wasn't even aware that it was there, to be perfectly honest. So when I saw the address, I was like, oh, wait, it's just literally behind the college? I guess that makes sense because, the one in Duluth is kind of the same way.
Yeah, and as soon as I saw the sign, I was like, this is a great choice. You can tell from the outside that the building is of an era. It was built in 1980, and it really speaks to that era of hope and optimism and excitement regarding space exploration.
I want to give that special shout out to Terry for the recommendation. She's always been a champion for Iron Range-centric stories. So you touched on a little bit, gave a little tease here and there, but how would you describe the Paulucci Space Theater?
So the Paulucci Space Theater, despite its unusual name, is a planetarium, but it's an extra cool planetarium. As I mentioned, built in 1980, it is on the campus of Minnesota North College, Hibbing campus, formerly known as Hibbing Community College. And it is distinctive in a couple different respects. It's Minnesota's second largest planetarium. We talked to Kevin Milani, who has been part of the planetarium team from the very beginning, and he explained to us what is special about the Paulucci Space Theater.
The Paulucci Space Theater is unique, number one, because the dome size is much larger than a typical planetarium for a typical college. Most planetaria on college campuses or school campuses have 30-foot diameter domes, whereas this one is 40-foot diameter. This is the second largest planetarium dome in the state of Minnesota. Only one larger is at the Bell Museum in St. Paul. Secondly, this place is unique in that all the seats face forward. The control console is in the front, not in the middle. The dome is tilted. And so it is a very unique facility.
So Jay, it wasn't always called the Paulucci Space Theater. It was originally just Paulucci Planetarium, but they decided they had to go through a rebrand a little bit to be more accurate to what it actually is.
That's right. They installed a film projector, and this back by the mid-1980s, they had a film projector. They had a bunch of different slide projectors that were computer controlled. It was a big deal at the time. And so they were able to show films, not just have planetarium shows. They've got a star ball, as it's called, to project the cosmos onto this dome. But then they also have this projector. And so they decided that space theater was a more appropriate name for this facility that also happens to be a planetarium.
Yeah, and based off of our experience visiting it, I feel like it looked a little more space aging than I think we were initially anticipating. When you imagine a planetarium, you don't imagine kind of having like basically a Star Trek looking console in the front of the dome room there.
Yeah, I love it. When you enter this auditorium, there are rows of seats facing the front, as Kevin explained. And then the operator, Kevin in this case, sits at this console that my first thought was, well, obviously it looked very science fiction, as these are angular mounted panels angling away from the chair. And the first thought that I had was operator stations on the Death Star, where those gunners stand there and they've got the panels surrounding them. Kevin pointed to another famous space franchise that may have helped inspire the look of this planetarium.
Sorry, they had to be influenced by Star Trek with this. That's just, and like I say, back when we first opened, this was right here, like I said, a computer system that ran the 24 computer-controlled slide projectors. To be perfectly frank, I don't remember what we had here. It's just been so long since those controls have been out of here. And like I say, over here, this was the controls for the 870 movie projector, which I just haven't had the heart to get rid of this. I just think it still looks cool, so I just left it there.
So while you were there, he got to walk us through kind of all the different things they can do with the console and the system they have there. So with the Star Trek looking console, he was able to change the atmospheric room lighting. He went from like white, nice and bright, to like blue, green, intense red to kind of like get your eyes primed for dark nighttime shots. He put on a little sample of like a projected show. I think that was about like the Bethlehem Star science feature. Along with the new tech there's also one piece of old tech that's still being now interworked into the new system they have in place, a star ball.
Yep, the original star ball, which has been tweaked over the years. Obviously, the stars haven't moved. That part of it is the same, but it gets adjusted and calibrated over time to make sure that it is correctly configured. And because the mechanism just sort of, ages and, wears and doesn't point as precisely as it once did. So they come in and recalibrate it every now and again, but it still does rise out of its little door in the middle of the auditorium on its original motor.
Yeah, and he brought down the lights for us so we could see the full experience of the Star Ball. I wish that it wasn't so dark that I could get a photo or a video with my camera. I think I got you could see a little bit of the light on the ball itself in my video, just a little bit. Very faintly though, but you can barely see with your eyes. Like there's a reason why. See, he had to have the red lights up for a while to like kind of prime our eyes to be able to see the nighttime sky, and we had to make sure all external lights were off. Even like I had to close my camera monitor and everything. Like it's really dark. It really was like a night photography kind of experience. It was pretty accurate to what he said it would be.
Yeah, so our listeners are going to have to go and see it for themselves and keep your phone turned off. And also, we learned, here's a tip, don't bring your light up sneakers. They have a lot of school kids, and that has been an issue in the past when kids have sneakers that light up in the dark.
So, Jay, how did Hibbing come to have Minnesota's second largest planetarium?
This dates back to a vision that Kevin Milani himself and some of his fellow Iron Range stargazing friends had way back in 1975, he explained.
The Paulucci Space Theatre began as an idea at a meeting of the Hibbing Astronomy Club, of which I was president, back in 1975. We were meeting at the home of kind of the one older member of the club who was our former teacher, Dale Gibbs, and the idea of a planetarium came up. And Dale, being older, more established, kind of got the ball rolling. I wrote a letter to then Lieutenant Governor Rudy Perpich, expressing interest in having a planetarium in Hibbing. Rudy wrote back and said, "Oh, Kevin, we've got some ideas about this."
So Rudy Perpich, that's one of two important names associated with the creation of the Paulucci Space Theatre. Rudy Perpich was Minnesota's longest serving governor, the only governor to come from the Iron Range, and was heavily invested personally and with, government funds as available during his tenure with helping to reinvent the Iron Range economy, which at the time was seeing a slowdown of mining and steel production and really kind of needed to find some new ways to bring people to the region. And so attractions like a space theater were right in keeping with Rudy Perpich's vision for a renewed range. The other name, of course, to know is Paulucci, as in Gino Paulucci, is the late Duluth food magnate who was from the Iron Range originally, and he made a substantial contribution through his family foundation, which is why the Paulucci Space Theater bears his name.
So although the planetarium dates back to 1980, as we kind of alluded to with like we walked through the different features that the Space Theater now offers, it went through some updates. But how did that come about?
That's Kevin Milani again, and we're glad to have him there to tell us about it. It basically, during the COVID shutdown, he had some time, and, it turned out that some people, maybe going out less, had a little bit of extra money to share with a charitable cause, and had a lot of memories that they might have been feeling particular nostalgia for in those months when we couldn't gather in large groups.
When everything was shut down for COVID in 2020, I decided that this place needed to be upgraded. So I set out to raise some money. And I found it remarkably easy to raise money because everybody I was dealing with had come here as children. In fact, many of them said, I remember, Kevin, you doing shows for us back when we were here in the 80s or 90s. And so I was able to raise $155,000 and completely redo this place. So out went all the old slide projectors, the movie projector, and we've got completely new digital projection systems in here. So it's the place is really state of the art now, which is very exciting for me.
So Jay, while we were there, beyond the Star Ball, he gave us a little bit of a tour around the backside of the dome as well, a little more behind the scenes. So we got to see more evidence of the theater's past, and maybe some past ideas that never really became reality.
Yeah, here's some audio from when Kevin took us back behind the screen after showing us. First, when we were sitting in the auditorium, he was adjusting the lights, as you mentioned, Wyatt, and he turned up the lights behind the screen. So we were able to see from within the auditorium what most people would never have any idea is just right back there behind the dome screen, this whole elevated storage area. And here's a little audio from our visit to that area.
So we're back behind the dome. Here's the dome right here, made out of perforated metal. It's honestly hanging on all of these chains from the ceiling. Back here we've got these boxes that used to contain the slide projectors back in those days. They're all gone now. All the slide trays for all the programs we used to run here over the years. We really don't have a capability of showing them anymore, but I just never had the heart to get rid of all of them.
And just to clarify for listeners, that one sounds a little different because I was taking photos with my camera at the time. I was not resuming the audio recording. So that's why it sounds a little different. That one's from Jay's audio recorder. But we're still glad to have that extra audio of why we're walking around and behind the scenes outside of the formal interview.
Yeah, and I'm also glad that I had our recorder running when you and I went out to the lobby with Kevin after seeing the storage space, because I was so excited to see this reservoir that he had told us about, never used, but this vast space that exists beneath the lobby. Open a trapdoor in the lobby. There's a gift shop. They're selling their astronaut ice cream, all of that. Little, space programs are playing. There are murals. It's really cool. And then when you're able to look underneath it, you realize you're standing on a 16-foot deep chasm that stretches across the entire front of the building.
One side opens before the other will not. You can get your feet out of it. There we go. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Now, you can see it.
Oh my God.
I don't know what this is. What? That over there.
God.
Yeah, you can see it all the way down there. Now look at that. What is this?
This is where oh my God, this is where the water would have gone for the solar day.
Get your light in here.
Oh, Lord.
Don't fall. It's seriously deep.
No, I don't know what this is. This is something, but there's the bottom down there. There you go. Down there.
That is wild.
Isn't that wild? I know. The entire front half of this building, down the basement, along that wall, facing this way, are all the big pipes that would have carried water into it. Circulated through the building. It's incredible.
So listeners, about halfway through that soundbite, you'll notice the audio quality changes because I actually did catch up to them with my audio recording. What happened was we were doing our tour. I was getting some footage of the dome room. Jay and Kevin kind of went off on their own, and then all of a sudden I hear, Wyatt, come here. So I kind of like rush over and like they're like opening this the floor is open, and then the lobby. Look in, it's just this big old chasm. At that point, I start recording. I start getting the audio, and my first thought looking at it was, oh my gosh, if I fall in, they're not going to get me out. That's going to take a whole like crew of rescue people to be able to maybe get me out of there if I were to tumble down in there. It was quite expansive.
Yeah, I mean, when you think 16 feet, that's kind of like a small like ballroom ceiling. So you imagine like a whole ballroom underneath this Paulucci Space Theater, unused. Why is it unused? Because you heard Kevin talking about the pipes. So the idea was when the Space Theater was designed that it was going to be solar powered. The Hibbing Daily Tribune reported on this. It was going to be a very big deal. It was going to be one of the most northern, fully solar heated facilities anywhere. In Minnesota, the U.S., the world, that wasn't quite clear. But the point was, it was going to be pretty unique that this planetarium was going to be entirely solar heated. And so the chasm was to contain the water that would have been heated by solar panels and then circulated through the facility to heat it. Well, the only problem was when they finished the building, they didn't have the budget yet to buy the actual solar panels. That would have been $250,000, which translates to nearly $1 million today. So when you consider they just had a huge fundraising effort to raise $150,000 in today's money, you think, boy, $1 million for those solar panels, that was a lift that never happened. So the solar system was never installed, but the chasm is still there waiting for the water someday when the solar panels come in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that'll ever happen one day? They'll get the solar panels and actually make use of the reservoir, or is just going to be kind of be there for the foreseeable future?
I really hope so. I think that would just be, such a neat tribute to the vision of this place. I hope someone listening decides to drop $1 million. And actually, it would probably be less now, right? Because I mean, that's when I updated those dollar values, it was updated, compared to what the equivalent would have been at the time. Mm-hmm. But solar panels have got to be much more affordable today than they would have been in 1980. So presumably, it would cost far less than $1 million to get working solar panels today. So I do hope that happens.
But I imagine now, like nowadays, there's more opportunities for tax incentives or grants available to be able to get that kind of funding that maybe just wasn't, it was kind of emerging then at the time. So now it's kind of, we've had decades now to kind of develop that front a little bit. So maybe.
Hopefully that's the next story we write about it. Another thing that would cost definitely less than $1 million to finish is a form of telescope they plan to build that would have tracked the movement of the sun and via a series of mirrors projected it down into the lobby. There's a tube for it. They've got the whole infrastructure there. They just never actually built the mechanism. So again, I'm not quite sure what the price point on that would be, but probably not $1 million. So that could maybe be sort of a lower price point item that you could contribute towards if they're interested in working with you on that.
I mean, this speaks to my science literacy a little bit, but that sounds pretty science fiction-y and kind of cool. Like the projection of the sun in the lobby reflected from these mirrors or whatever. That sounds pretty cool.
I don't know too much about telescope technology, but I gather this is the same kind of thing that, without the modern mirrors, they would have, known and done some form of since, the ancient days, right? Just
That's
basically,
true.
Tracking the movement of the sun. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but I mean, cool to make it work, right?
Oh, yeah. So what's the future of the Paulucci Space Theater?
Well, Kevin Milani hopes that the future looks basically a lot like the past, that it continues to be a place that kids from the Iron Range and people, up on the range and from all of northern Minnesota and the region can come to learn and be inspired. That's been his story after all. He told us a story about how while he was cleaning during lockdown, he made a discovery that reconnected him with his own history of childhood stargazing.
And I was going through some of the old magazines, getting rid of duplicates and so on and so forth. And I came across a little bundle of magazines, about yay big, rubber band together. And I picked them up and I looked at them. They were Sky and Telescope magazines from 1968 and 1969. And in the upper right corner, they had Kreis written in handwriting. Well, that was Bert Kreis. He was my 7th grade science teacher at Hibbing High School in 1968 to 1969. And I suddenly realized what I was holding in my hands. My love for astronomy began in that class by looking at those very same Sky and Telescope magazines. Not just that issue, those actual magazines. And so I almost started crying. I thought, my God, these are the magazines I looked at 55 years ago. And so those went home with me, of course, because I just couldn't, they had to. So that's where my love for astronomy began. And as you say, I lived through the Apollo era. And just to still be associated with this place after all these years is really pretty neat.
Yeah, Kevin really has been involved with the history of the Space Theater. I know when he was showing us, we've got to mention before, when he showed us behind the dome area, there's a big old wall of old film reels that are no longer continued, but he had mentioned that doesn't have the heart to give them away because that he shot most of them himself, and they're just kind of sitting there, another piece of the past as they're kind of keeping that around as they continue to advance and move forward.
Yeah, and there are models models of spacecraft underneath the glass surface of the front counter that are all models that Kevin made himself, including some that he made when he was as young as 13 years old. They're all sort of on display there. But we should mention that he's not the only employee of the Space Theater, and in fact, he's officially retired. He's a retired college teacher, was his day job, and now he works part-time at the Space Theater to help keep the place going. But is basically at the point of his life where he's getting ready to, hand off the reins. And again, he does have colleagues there. It's definitely time for a new generation to step up and take the helm at this historic facility.
Mm-hmm. And Jay, as I like to always ask in the podcast, why do you think this fits so well into the curiosities that we look for in Northlandia?
I think the more that I learn about our region, the more I learn that this is an area of the country where people love to commit to the bit. They get a vision, they execute the vision, and they want to keep it there forever, right? Whether you're talking about the head frame to a mine, whether you're talking about an elaborate Christmas display, people here just go hard. They have bold visions. They make it happen. And then once it exists, just like with Marcia Hale's lights, people do not want to see that lighting display end, right? We've seen in people's response to these articles and these podcasts about Marcia Hale's lights that people really want to make sure that this display survives so that they don't just have memories to share, but they can actually bring their kids and grandkids to see the same lights. I feel like this is a great example of this. Look at the support that Kevin Milani has had in rejuvenating the Paulucci Space Theater and preserving it. And he's got some grants to, create new murals in the lobby and all sorts of stuff. People are really invested in making sure that this unique planetarium remains operative on the Iron Range. Second largest in Minnesota. We'll say it again.
All right, Jay. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you again so much for joining us. It's great to have you on here for first time in 2024.
To infinity and beyond.
And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, as well as see photos and video produced by myself, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. Next week, I'm joined by Northland filmmaker Maurice Anderson to hear stories behind the filming of the documentary 40 Below, the toughest race in the world. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support us, consider becoming a subscriber of the Duluth News Tribune at duluthnewstribune.com/subscribe. If you or someone you know has a unique story that you believe can have a place here in Northlandia, let us know by emailing northlandia@duluthnews.com. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're not in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.